So this lesson, what we're going to look at is the art history tool. And if I click on folder number 2, lesson number 2, it's going to bring up a list of different projects. And my folders are organized so that I have a lesson with the tutorials, some explanation of visual demonstration of what the project should look like at the end, and then finally the assignment. And the assignment does have a rubric. The rubric has the project followed all the following directions. You used the right skills, you saved it as the right file type, and you gave it the right file name. So this is, I think they're 25 points apiece, 4 different things. As long as you follow the directions, you use the right skills, and the projects look something similar to the results, it should be good to go. So in this first example, what we're going to look at is part 1 is making a selection and a cutout in Photoshop. And so these are some skills that we have not worked with before. We did the paintbrush and changing size and shape and colors and stuff like that last week. We're going to look at using some more skills this week. And so you can follow along. I highly recommend that as we go through this video, that once we complete a step, that you pause, go out into Photoshop, complete that task, and then make sure that you can do that before hitting play and continuing on with the video. This video might be a little bit long, only because we have a lot of stuff to cover in this selection and cutout tutorial. So we're going to open up Adobe Photoshop. This says CC at the top. I believe the one that we're working with currently is Adobe Photoshop 2020. And it says that we need to open the file peaches_image.jpg that is included with this assignment, which if I go back out to my folder, you'll find a Peaches Images JPEG file right here. And you can click on that. It's going to open it up. And then you can either control and then click to bring up the second menu, the secondary menu. You can right click if you have a mouse, or you can 2-finger click. There's 3 different ways to pull up this menu. I suggest going to save image as, because that will let us choose our folder to save it to. I'm going to change to my documents folder. I'm going to go down to multimedia, second hour, and I'm going to hit save. So this saves that image inside of that folder on our computer. Excuse me. So inside Photoshop now, because I have that saved, what I want to do here is when I have Photoshop open, I want to go to File, Open. Eventually, it will open up here. I want to make sure that I am going to my Documents folder. And I'm going to go to Multimedia. Probably just do the list view here. It makes it a little bit easier. Doesn't have to render all those things. There we go. List view. There's Peaches image. Wherever you saved it. If it's in downloads, you might have to click on downloads. I saved mine into this folder, so it's right there. When I hit open, it'll open this file up, and it will look like well, whenever it does open up, it will open up and it'll put the Peaches image on the desktop. The second box in the tutorial there's Peaches. The second box in the tutorial has you resetting the essentials group. That puts the tools where they're supposed to be. It puts the colors and the different tabs across the color box up here at the top where it's supposed to be. The layers, channels, and paths is at the bottom. It just kind of resets everything for you. So if you go to Window, which is at the top here, Workspace, and it should say Essentials Default. So if at some point you lose the color or you lose layers or you lose the toolbar here or things move around, you can always reset this by going to the Essentials item and then resetting Essentials. And that will reset everything back to what it should have been when you opened up this computer and you got this one going. Now, the one that we can close out of right now is the Learn, Libraries, and Adjustments panel. We don't need that one, so we can close this tab group. And I did that by clicking on the 3 lines over here and hit Close Tab Group. What that's going to do is just give us more real estate on the computer to work with this file. A couple things about this image right here and Photoshop. I can look up here across the top and see that this says peaches_image.jpg. That tells me what file I opened up. It also tells me that this is at 33.3%. So this is 1/3 of the real size of this image. So I am zoomed out looking at a small version of this. It also tells me down here, 33.33%, that I'm 1/3 of the view. If I wanted to zoom in, I could do a Option and then 2-finger swipe up and it lets me zoom in, or 2-finger swipe down lets me zoom out. If I have a mouse, I can roll the wheel. Sometimes. I just have to hold Option to roll the wheel too, to zoom in. Or I can also come down here. If I know what percentage, I can type in the little box down here in the corner, 75, and press Enter, and it'll zoom me into 75%. If I want to go 100%, I click in the little box down here in the corner, 100%. It's going to bring me in that far. If I want to go even higher, I can do 200%. It's going to bring me right into the picture a little bit farther. But I do find it's easiest to click Option and then swipe to move myself around. And then you can do 2-finger on the touchpad, 2-finger drag around without clicking anything else. It lets you move around the image. So on the image here, I'm going to zoom back out because I don't need to be that close to it right now. On this image, on Photoshop, on the right-hand side below the colors, is a panel that's called Layers, Channels, and Paths. And layers give you the different levels of this image. And right now, we just have one called the background. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to create a number of different layers. Or if you think about an onion has a whole bunch of different pieces that wrap around and create that package of an onion. We are going to be taking this image and we're going to add some different layers to build up this final product that we're creating. And a layer basically is like putting a blank piece of plastic or transparent material over top of the image and then being able to work with that one and have it affect everything that goes on down below. So if I am creating an image or a new layer, and I go down here to the bottom, you're going to see that there is a button at the bottom of this panel that has a plus sign. And this plus sign is going to create a new layer. And when I do that, I come back up here, you'll see that I have the background, looks like this, and then I have a new one called Layer 1. And Layer 1 is just going to be a blank level of the image above the background. So if, just as an example here, as we're going through this thing, if I was to take a paintbrush now and paint over top, you see I'm painting on top of this thing, make a bigger brush. So I have this one right here. If I turn the eyeball off, there's an eyeball here, the visibility of this layer. There's no effect that happens on the background layer. But this also means that you have to be aware of which layer that you're currently clicked on. because you can make changes to an existing layer and you might think you're on a different one. So it's very important to understand how the layers work, and we'll be working with layers on each of the projects that we create over the next couple of weeks to months. I'm going to delete this layer because I don't need that on there. So now the next box in the tutorial says right-click on the background layer and select duplicate layer. And to right-click is also the option click. No, I'm sorry, not option click, control click. There we are. And it has duplicate layer, and that's the option that we're going to choose. And you can see that that shows up the exact same on the image there. So when I duplicate this, this is going to create a background copy, and I hit OK, and it's going to put a new layer above the original background that's called background copy. The next panel in the tutorial says turn the copied layer black and white by going to Image, Adjustments, Black and White, or by using the shortcut command, Command-Shift Option B, which is down on your keyboard there. But I can do Image, Adjustments, Black and White, and you can see that this will only affect, when I click OK, it'll only affect this top layer. There's nothing that's happened to the bottom. I don't want to change that background because that's my original image. So if I turn off this eyeball, the visibility for this layer, I'm back to the original one. You can see that I'm still on this background copy. If I turn that back on, it turns into the, it turns that layer on, or turns that one back on, and now it's black and white. So we're going to practice some things. The first tool that we're going to look at is called the magnetic lasso, and it is over here on the side, and I'm going to zoom in on this. The lasso tool, you see the demonstration here, it has these things called marching ants. After you make a selection, these ants, so to speak, march around whatever the selection is, and it creates a selected piece of that product. So if you hold down the mouse or click the touchpad and you hold down this thing, you'll see that there are three options inside the lasso tool. The first one is just a generic lasso. It's a generic lasso that lets you select things. So if I click out here, I can, what does this say? Normal pixels more than 50%. There we go. So if I draw a selection, I try and follow around this peach, you can see that it has marching ants around it now. But this is a very, not super difficult, but it takes a lot of patience and very much not super difficult, but just you have to be very, very consistent with your motion on the trackpad or the mouse, and you can actually, it doesn't really follow the actual line of where you're going. This is one way of doing the selection tool. You see that I missed a spot here. I missed something over here. I can add to that, and I can show you how to do that in a little bit. But the part that we're looking for here on the lasso tool is actually the magnetic lasso. And what that does is that one will follow as I click someplace along an edge. You can see right there, the end of the point, if I click, and now as I'm selecting, my mouse is not really following that line very well, but because of Photoshop's ability to see the difference in the gradients between one object and another one, you can see that it kind of snaps to the outside edge there. So I can move along that general idea, general area of wherever this item is, and it's going to follow the outside of this product, this peach. When I click at the very end, I get to that little square at the end. You can see that it has correctly attached itself to the outside edge of this. Zoom back out. One of the things that you have to be aware of, there is a contextual setting to make up here. If I click and drag this around this peach right here, you can see I'm going relatively quickly, that there is now, I have two selections. I have the original two that I had drawn around, and then this one. So up here in the contextual menu, there are 4 different options for how the selection works. If I create the new selection, the next time I go around a peach, it's going to stop selecting something else, and it's going to only allow me to have this one selected. So you see that my selection went away from this peach over here. If I did another one, you'll see that it unselects the previous one, and now that is my only selection. If I do the add to, it's going to allow me to select more than one thing all at the same time. So when I go around here, you can still see that I have marching ants on the other one. When I get back to the start, now I have 2. And I can do around this one really quick. Now I have 3. So I have that happening. I can subtract from a selection. I'm sorry, the add to is really helpful if you were trying to select something and it did not select part of whatever item you're trying to grab. You can always, let's say I wanted to have both of these on there. I could click in here, and this is going to add to whatever the existing selection is. So if it missed some material there, I can come back and add that to the item. Right here, every time I click, it's going to create a new point as well. And so I can circle around things to add that selection to the product. You see up here, I have this little bump that sticks out across the top. There is an option here that's called subtract. And that one, a lot of times it's easier to use the lasso or the polygon lasso tool to do some of this stuff. But I can select underneath. And now, because, I had new selection. Doggone it. Didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. There it is. I want to hit subtract. And this one, when I drag around and make a circle around that little bit, it's going to subtract just the inside stuff. And so now you can see that now it follows that line a little bit better. And you can see that there's a little minus sign on my icon there. If I do the add to, it's going to have a little plus sign. And if I do the new selection, it's going to have nothing to it. It's just the selection arrow there and the lasso tool. It doesn't have anything underneath it. We're not going to work with a difference right now, but it's very helpful to have the add and subtract and new selection. I would suggest using the new selection for most of the work here, because that'll help you for the most part. So if I go to magnetic lasso tool and I'm making a new selection, you can see on the tutorial, I chose a magnetic lasso tool. The setting is for a new selection as shown on that little graphic. And then after a peach has been selected, I'm going to go out here to the middle again. Let's go down here. There we go. And I'm going to click on this one. And again, I'm using that magnetic selection lasso to go around the outside here. And then when I get back to the start, you can see that that's selected. If I press the delete key, it makes the gray scale, the black and white version, it makes the black and white version go away. So the only thing I've done here, if I zoom in on this one, you really can't see it because it's not a big enough image, but all I've done is remove part of this so that the background will shine through the part here. So that removes the black and white part of the image, and it lets the original peach show through. And it says that you can press Command D to deselect that peach. And so if I go down here where that peach was, I can do a Command D, and it turns those marching ants off. So I can go to the next one. If I'm going to do this, go back over here. So if it does that where it kind of goes on the inside there, you can always click and then create your own spot if you need to. I don't want to do that. I want to let it do its own. But if it does miss a piece as you're drawing, the closer you are to the actual border that you're tracing, will end up with a better result. I have that one. I press the delete key on the keyboard. Come over here. And I'm just tracing around the peaches. And so we want to get at least 10 peaches selected. Excuse me. There's that one. It's underneath some other ones. If I hit delete, you'll see that that shows through. So now what we're looking at here is an image that has some black and white, but we are just deleting some of the color or the black and white portion to let that color shine through. So you're going to continue doing that. And the goal here is to have at least 2 peaches from each basket showing the original color. So each basket here, you can see that I have that one. There's a handful of baskets on there. So you're going to keep doing that until you have at least 2 in each one. You should select non-touching peaches so the color is isolated to one location. So you see these peaches are not touching. If I do 2 that are touching, it doesn't make the effect look as neat. So at the end of this one, we're going to save this project as, let me unselect this existing peach up here, Command D to deselect that. I'm going to save this as your last name on the computer. This is going to pop up, so the very first time you do this, you can check the don't show it again and save on your computer. That way we have them on your computer every single time. So if you don't have access to the internet, it's not going to try and save your files out to the internet. You can see that it still has Multimedia 1 and my Peaches image is in there currently. It tells me that's the folder that I'm saving in. This is trying to save as peaches_image.psd. And Photoshop document is what the PSD stands for. This is going to keep all of our layers, any colors that we do, any editing that we do out here on the image. It's going to save that. So it's very important that for our project, as we're working through this, that you're going to save this as image.psd or whatever it is. I'm going to save this one as my last name. And then peaches.psd, because that will let us continue working on this project and opening it up and saving it and having all these layers available. You want to make sure if you want to be able to edit these layers and anything else that's been done to this image, that you are saving it as a Photoshop document. Hit save. You'll see that now my new saved image is up there. So, in a suggestion as you finish up the assignment, I cannot view a Photoshop document on the grading side of things, and so in order to view these images, we need to save them as JPEG files. So we're going to say that I have already done all the images. I've gone through, I've deleted, I've made it look very nice. I'm trying to stay as close to the edge as possible, and I have all my peaches selected. All the ones that I need to have drawn have been drawn and saved and all that stuff. Anyway, to save this file for submission to our classroom account, we're going to go up here to save to make sure that the Photoshop document is saved. And then we're going to go save as. And you can see that it pulls up the millerpeaches.psd. And because this is tutorial number 1, we're going to save this as Peaches1. So my name, Peaches1. And this time, because I want to be able to view this on the school account, on the Schoology grade book, I want to choose where it says format here, and I'm going to go down to where it says JPEG, JPEG. There's 3 options here. We just want to do the straight, basic, plain old JPEG. And it's going to say, are you sure? We hit yes. It's going to ask us for some options. Whatever it says on here is fine. We click OK. And you can see that it says saving. If I go out to my folder now, I'm going to see a couple different things. I'm going to see Peaches image. That's the original one that I started. I'm going to see peaches.psd. And the kind over here on the side says that it is an Adobe Photoshop file. Stretch that one out or not. There we go. It says it's an Adobe Photoshop file. PSD lets us open the layers and stuff here in Photoshop. And then finally, the very first one here, because that's the most recent one that I've saved, it says Miller Peaches 1. And if I do the preview of this one, you can see that I have my image with the 4 that I have created in this tutorial. The 4 peaches have been cut out of that area. So this is the part that I would turn in for part number 1. So I go out here to Schoology. Go back to lesson 2 folder. And down to the assignment, it asks for actually 3 parts because we have 3 parts of this this project. And so it says make sure you turn in Peaches part 1, part 2, and part 3. So I'm going to add part 2 and part 3 on here, but you want to have your last name and then Peaches in part 1, part 2, part 3. And it says you will be turning in 3 images for this project. And so you're going to turn those 3 in over here on the side. And if you remember in the basic Photoshop document, there is a pacing guide, and this tells you in here also what needs to be turned in. So we're looking at, so you got to click on this one right here. Either way, you're turning in Peaches part 1, part 2, and part 3. So there's 3 different parts to this tutorial. So this introduction tutorial to Photoshop selection is part 1, and then the next video will cover the next part of this, which is doing some text selection, and then the final one is doing a different version of that same text selection. So we're looking at doing that part, and then on the next installment of this the video, the next tutorial, we'll cover part 2, and then the final one will cover part 3. So you have those 3 parts that are going to be turned in for this assignment. If you have any questions, please let me know.